Hey guys, Cronometer is a food tracking app that records both the macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fat, and the micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals in the foods that you log. This is a tutorial for how to export your data to Google Sheets and tidy it up, known as data cleaning, for future analysis. The eventual output of this will be some graphs that plot your micronutrient intake over time, but first we need to make sure that your data is as complete as possible. By complete, I mean all the micronutrient data is available for the foods you have logged. If you already use Cronometer, you may have noticed that a branded version of a supermarket food such as Sainsbury's sweet corn in the UK only has a small number of nutrients listed and has no data for vitamins or minerals. In contrast, there is often a generic version, in this case corn, yellow, canned, drained, which has 82 nutrients available. By using the generic versions, it unlocks the ability to more accurately track your vitamin and mineral intake across the year, and that's what I'm going to show you how to do now. If you haven't already, you will need to download the Cronometer app and start logging your food for, I would say, at least a week. If you've never used Cronometer, watching this will still give you helpful pointers before you first use the app, but for the rest of this tutorial, I'll assume you have already started logging. So the first step will be to download your Cronometer data. On your desktop, go to cronometer.com and log in. On the left-hand tab, click More and then Your Account. Scroll down on this page until you find the Export Data button. Click it, then depending on how much data you have, you can select up to the last year, and you're choosing Export Food and Recipe Entries. This should now download to your computer, hopefully somewhere easy to find, like your downloads folder, and it will be named servings.csv. For the next step, you're going to need my data cleaning sheet. It's linked in the description below. Please do not request access. Simply go to File, make a copy. This copy is the one you will edit and I won't be able to see. So maybe add your name so you know that it's yours. Open your copy of the sheet and in the tab named 1 Raw Data, go to File, Import, and select Upload. Locate the file you just downloaded. In my case, it's in my downloads folder named servings.csv. For import location, choose Replace Current Sheet, then the big green button to import data. It may take a few seconds if you've chosen a long time period, as it will be several thousand rows and dozens of columns. So what you're seeing here is a row for every individual portion of something you ate every day for the period of time you selected, in my case, the last year. I'll now walk you through the tabs at the bottom, starting with 2, the transformed data. This is an exact copy of the raw data sheet with one extra column in column A called complete. You don't have to understand the formula in the cell, but what it's doing is saying that the food needs to contain more than 14 nutrients for it to be considered complete data. 14 is quite an arbitrary choice, but I tend to find a lot of incomplete foods have only 7 or 8 nutrients listed. So an example here is peanut butter, which has data for all the B vitamins, and underneath that is a certain brand of fish fingers, which has calories but no information on B vitamins, and scrolling to the right, it only has entries for basic nutrients like carbohydrate, sugar, salt, and fat. In sheet 3, daily calories, I've created a simple pivot table, which will count all the calories for each day you have data. Since the exact order of columns might be different from my data, I've left it blank and you will need to locate the little pencil icon in the bottom left and click it. From there, you need to go to Values, click Add, and locate energy bracket kilocalorie, which you can then select. It might then say Count A under the Summarize By, and you're clicking that and changing it to Sum. You should now see some numbers in the thousands, hopefully, for your daily calorie intake. In sheet 4, that's automatically put into a graph with your daily calories in blue and a moving average in black to show your average calorie intake across 7 days. It may also serve as a way to see days where you've failed to log some or all of your food. Anything suspiciously low may be days where you didn't manage to enter everything. In my case, these dips are legitimate bouts of illness or food poisoning where I ate very little. Next up are sheets 5 and 6, which are a table and graph view that highlight the percentage of calories for which you have incomplete data. The table view will highlight days where less than 80% of the calories you've logged have complete data. If you wanted to change that threshold, you can click on one of the cells in column B, go to Format, Conditional Formatting, then where it says value is less than 0.8, you can click and change the number, remembering that for percentages, 1 means 100%. So if you wanted to increase it to 90%, you could enter 0.9 and click Done. Personally, I like the graph view, and ahead of the data cleaning process, you can start to get a feel for what you consider an acceptable amount of missing data. In my case, I'd like to get above 90% complete on all days if possible, meaning no more than 10% of my calories are missing vitamin and mineral information. Now onto the actual data cleaning. So what are we trying to achieve here? First, it's worth repeating the main concept of Cronometer's app, which is that most of the foods with full micronutrient data are the generic version of a product. What that means is your Hovis white bread that you either find by searching or with the barcode scanner may only have 8 nutrients, while if you search for the generic white bread, store-bought, it will contain around 80. The downside is that not all white breads are created equal, so it may be under or over reporting on certain nutrients, but for most foods, it's hopefully in the right ballpark. I like to at least match calories, so if my Hovis bread is 93 calories per slice, I'll pick the serving size that best matches that. In this case, it says a cup of bread cubed. I ignore that unit because it's spot on at 93 calories. How we're going to clean the data and increase the percentage of daily calories with complete data is to find the rows with your Hovis, your Kingsmill and Warburton breads and replace them with the generic version. Then repeat that process for other commonly consumed foods. That takes us on to sheet 7, called Highest Calorie Foods Missing Micros. Again, I'll need your help completing it, so first locating the pencil icon and clicking to edit. Where it says rows, you want to click add and add in food name. Next to values, you're clicking add and selecting energy (kilocalorie). You are changing the summarize by to sum. And finally, to order it, you are going to the food name. And where it says order, you are choosing descending. And under sort by, you are choosing sum of energy (kilocalorie). The table you've created is now looking at every time you logged something with incomplete nutrients. It's adding up all the calories for the time period of your data and ranking them from highest to lowest total calories. Despite being generally good at logging complete foods and not having much variety in my diet, I still have over 100 foods here, so you might have many, many more than me. A note that you may find supplements at the bottom here. Often they're 0 calorie and they may be exempt from being considered incomplete because something like ZMA only contains 2 nutrients, zinc and magnesium. Since at some point the effort of finding a replacement food won't be worth the gain and extra information, it makes sense to start from the top of this list with the ones that will have the biggest overall impact and work your way down until you are satisfied or you run out of patience. There are 3 different data cleaning techniques, and we'll start with the simplest, which involves the top food on the list, John West mackerel fillets. Before we do that, we need a sheet where we're going to store the cleaned data. For now, sheet 8 is a direct copy of what you see in sheet 2. We're going to leave column A alone because that's a formula. So I need you to highlight column B all the way to the end. You can do that by holding Control on your keyboard. For those on a Mac, it will be Command, but for simplicity in this video, I will say Control each time. So Control and then press A twice. Still holding Control, click the top of column A to deselect it. And still holding Control, you're going to press C to copy. This might take a few seconds because it's a lot of information. You can now release control, right-click the first cell in column B, which hopefully says day, and what you're going to do is paste the values. So paste special, values only. Again, it might take a while, but hopefully nothing crashes. When that's done, it means this sheet is no longer pulling data from sheet 2, and you're free to edit it. The final step to make the data cleaning easy is to create a filter, either using the filter icon or going to Data, Create a Filter. You can now search by individual foods and filter for only those rows. Okay, for technique number 1, I'll use the food item at the top of my list, John West mackerel fillets in brine. What I'm actually consuming is supermarket brand mackerel fillets in spring water. The first thing to do is to check if you've ever logged the generic version. So I'll go to sheet 8, the cleaned data sheet. I'll click on the food name filter and click clear so that no data is selected. Then I'll search for the item I want. I'm not going to type in John West because that's the brand. I want the food itself. So I'll type in mackerel. You can see that I have the item I'm trying to replace and what looks to be the generic version of mackerel. So I'll tick both and click OK. You can see from the filter that it's showing the 100 times I ate mackerel in a year, the vast majority of which are the branded version. I'm going to tidy this up a bit by clicking on the food name filter again, then selecting sort A to Z, and we can now clearly see all my incomplete data at the top and complete data underneath. You can see I've made an attempt to match the calories by logging either 90 or 180 grams of the generic mackerel. Since portion size matters, I'm going back to the top of the sheet and I'll click on the amount filter and sort that by A to Z. I'm now going to copy a generic row that contains a single portion, but I'm not going to copy the whole row because that would change the date on which I ate the food. So I need to select from column C all the way to the end, which I will do by clicking the row using the numbers on the left, then holding Control and clicking the cells in columns A and B to deselect them. I'll copy with Control C. I'm then going to highlight column C for rows where I have a single portion of the John West mackerel, and I'll use Control V to paste in the new values. I'll repeat the process with a double portion, and I'm now left with 2 rows where I ate an irregular portion size. For the 1 tin, I'm happy to consider that a single portion, and I can copy in a single portion there. At the top, I have 0.7 portions, equivalent to around 70 grams of the generic product. If I was being very precise, I would copy the food name from the generic version and paste it in. I'd change the portion size to 70 grams, and in the calorie cell, I would type in equals. Then I'd click the cell below, which contains information for a single portion. I'd then multiply by 70 and divide by 90 to get the proportions correct and press enter. If I hover my mouse over the bottom right corner of that cell, it should turn to a plus, and I can click and drag that along the whole row to recalculate those values. Now, as these cells contain a formula, it might go awry later when I start changing the filters or resorting the rows. So while I have everything selected, I'll use Control C, then right click, paste special, values only, and you can see the cells now contain the numbers themselves. So now I've successfully replaced all entries for John West mackerel with a version with complete micronutrient data. I'm going back into the food name filter. I'm going to select all and I'll click OK. Going back to sheet 7, you can see that we've just replaced over 15,000 calories of incomplete data. I've made a copy of this sheet in sheet 10, but this time it's using the cleaned data from sheet 8. So again, we can find the pencil icon, and we want the rows to be food name, the values to be energy in kilocalories. We want to summarize the values by sum. We want to order the rows by descending, and then sort by the sum. So John West fillets are no longer in the top position. I've also duplicated the daily calorie table and graphs from sheet 5 and 6 into sheets 11 and 12. Again, this now uses the cleaned data, so we can see the progress we've made by filling in missing data. It's only a single food item, but you would be able to tell the difference if you toggled between sheets 6 and 12. Now, what do you do if you've never had the generic version? In the next example, I'll use Heinz baked beans, which will fill another 7,500 calories of data. Here you have to go to the Cronometer app and search for an equivalent food. First, find the original. We're looking at 328 calories per can. Then search for the generic version. We have baked beans canned in tomato sauce. This has 48 nutrients, which is the most complete we're likely to get. And I know it's a 400-gram can, so I'll type 400 for the weight, and there we go. It matches to the calorie. You'll now need to log that food in today's diary, remembering to remove it later. Next, you're going to go back to the Cronometer desktop view and repeat the CSV export process. This time you're selecting today. So we're going to More, Your Account, scrolling down to Export Data. From the drop-down, we're only selecting today, and then Export Food and Recipe Entries. Since we've already downloaded something called servings, it's going to add a bracket to the file name to make sure that it's unique. Returning to the sheet, you're going to navigate to the final sheet you haven't seen yet, sheet 9, titled Temporary Import. And in there, we're going to File, Import, Upload, locate the file you've just downloaded, select Replace Current Sheet, and click Import Data. You're then going to find your newly logged food, highlight the row, then holding Control, you're clicking on the date in column A to deselect it, then Control C to copy the data. Make your way back to sheet 8, the cleaned data, use the food name filter, click Clear, then search for the food you're going to replace. Again, I'm going to order this by amount because I've had a few different portion sizes here. So amount filter, sort by A to Z. The data I copied started in the column after date. So I can highlight column C here for portions that are 328 calories. Then I'll use Control and V to paste the generic version. For the values at the top, I'll use the same trick as method 1. So in column F, I'm typing equals, then clicking a cell with the value for one portion, dividing by 2, and pressing enter. I can then click and drag to the end, copy those cells with Control C, right click, paste special, values only. We can do the same one more time for this quarter can of beans, which I'll do a bit faster as it's the same process, but this time dividing by 4. Alternatively, I could have divided my half can by 2 again. One final step is to change the food name and amount, though for this exercise it isn't strictly necessary. Once again, we can check sheet 10 to confirm that Heinz beans no longer sit in second spot before consulting the respective graphs in sheets 6 and 12, and it's having a noticeable impact on how complete the data is already. As you can imagine, it gets very tedious to go through this whole process just to replace a few hundred calories, so make your own judgment as to how much you're willing to do. The final data cleaning method I'll show you is even more involved, and I only did it because I couldn't find a generic equivalent for one of my number one food items. If you're someone who eats more processed foods, then you may find yourself using this tactic on more items in your diary. This is nykštukas. These are Lithuanian cheese curd bars, and I will admit I am obsessed with them. This is technique number 3, the recipe method. Cronometer allows you to create custom recipes with your own selection of ingredients. So this method is to recreate a given food or meal using raw ingredients. Knowing the bar's weight, macros, and calories, and that it's 54% curd, 15% dark chocolate coating, sugar, and butter, is enough to get a decent approximation. So the real version is 6 grams of protein, 13 grams of carbohydrate, and 11 grams of fat. And the recipe I made, noting that all ingredients will have full nutritional information, is 7 grams of protein, 15 grams of carbohydrate, and 10 grams of fat, so in the right vicinity. From there, it's the same as the second method, logging it for the current day, exporting the current day's food to a CSV, and bringing that into sheet 9. I'll go through this at a much faster rate because it is a repetition of what you saw me do earlier in this video. So once you've selected replace current sheet, import data, again, copy the relevant row, deselecting column A beforehand, Control C, move across to the clean data, the food name filter, clear, search for your food and select it. Then I'm selecting all the rows that are going to have one portion. And I'm going to use Control V to replace those rows. I'm then going to write a formula to calculate my odd portion sizes, as we've done in methods 1 and 2. This includes multiplying by 0.6 and 0.8 at the top here. Instead of dragging across, I'm just going to do Control C and then Control V to paste the formula, then paste the values, and change the names and the amounts. I'll repeat the process down the bottom of the sheet where there was 1.3 and 2 portions. Again, paste special, values only. I changed the food names here, but not the portions. And we can have one final look at the difference between sheet 6 and 12 before returning to sheet 10 to see the progress being made. So those are your 3 methods, either finding a food you've already logged that can replace other calories, logging a food and exporting from today in order to replace other calories, or in edge cases, creating a recipe and exporting that. You are of course free to repeat the process as many times as you wish until you're happy with the output. I've previously done this with a year of data, but with a slightly different set of dates, and we can see how I got on. I ended up doing around 30 foods, which took me right down to 500 calories, which means I probably ate it once or twice in the last year. We can then see the impact that has on the data. Again, I like to see the graph, and I'm really pleased with this. There's about 25 or 30 spikes, meaning around 340 days with full nutritional information. If there's a lesson to be learned here, it's that getting into the habit of logging the generic version of a food at the time you're entering it into your food diary saves a whole lot of hassle in the long run. The main video stops here, but I will add a few example graphs after this to show the result of all this hard work. If you're using this tutorial to clean your data, then I hope you found it valuable and you get lots of insights from your food diary. Thank you for watching. Okay, so you might ask yourself what the point was in all that data cleaning. There will be a separate video and accompanying spreadsheet for making the cool graphs with the data you've just cleaned, but here are 3 examples that have caused me to take action and improve my diet based on what the graphs were showing. So the first example is folate, which is vitamin B9. This was flagged on a blood test as being at the low end of normal back in July 2023, and if we go back even further to June of the previous year, I had stopped taking a daily multivitamin in an attempt to get all my nutrition from real food. That left my average folate intake in the second half of 2022 at 340 micrograms, with the RDA set at 400. I cleaned up my diet in the first few months of 2023, and the average from the rest of that year was 570 micrograms. However, in the new year of 2024, I tested lower, indicating a possible deficiency. And by then I'd got back out of the habit of eating legumes, my go-to folate source, quite so frequently. Another blood test in April suggesting a deficiency was enough for me to temporarily abandon this food-only approach, and I started taking a vitamin B complex, moving my average up to 820 micrograms per day, more than double the RDA. My 3 blood test results since then have still not been optimal, but are comfortably in the normal range. At some point, I plan to revisit the food-only approach, but I now know that my own requirements are twice the RDA of the general population. The second example is saturated fat. I take quite a casual approach to the foods I'm meant to limit, often telling myself I exercise enough that it doesn't matter. However, seeing my saturated fat intake in 2022 averaging 31 grams was a little concerning, remembering that 30 grams in this case is a recommended limit and not a target. Similar to how we cleaned the data with a pivot table of the highest calorie count, I was able to then create a pivot which showed me which foods contributed the most to my saturated fat intake across 2022 and on how many days I ate them, then a final column showing the percentage of my total saturated fat that they accounted for. From that, I saw 3 obvious places to improve: reducing my butter intake, switching from whole milk to semi-skimmed, and from 5% Greek yogurt to 0%. This switch took place midway through 2023, and although subtle, my average moved from 33 grams a day to 27. I maintained an average of 26 grams through to 2024, and in the last few weeks, I've made the move from semi-skimmed to skimmed milk, given how much of it I consume, with data in 2025 showing an average of 20 grams of saturated fat per day. I should note that some saturated fat is helpful in my diet, so the goal was never to minimize it. Lastly is protein. In this case, the RDA is nowhere near what is often considered optimal for gaining or maintaining muscle mass. But for years now, I've been working on the upper limit set for serious strength athletes, which is 2.2 grams per kilo of body weight, or in my case, around 155 grams. I averaged 150 grams a day in 2022 and 160 grams a day in both 2023 and 2024. However, in seeing a few out-of-range blood test results that cite a high-protein diet as a possible cause, I realized it may not be good for my body if I'm not really utilizing all this protein I'm feeding it. While I regularly take part in resistance exercise, I would not consider myself a serious strength athlete. So again, starting this year, I've revised my targets down to land between 120 and 140 grams per day. With an average of 140 grams per day for the first 4 weeks of this year, that's already over 500 grams of protein I've not made my body process, equivalent to a dozen chicken breasts. I have more examples, and I eat relatively well, so if you're someone who isn't on top of their diet, you may find a real treasure trove of insights when you dive into your data. So that is the end of a very long video. Thank you for watching this far. Best of luck in your analysis and your journey to better health. Cheers.